But whenever he did the inspection, I asked him, okay, well, you did this, what's next? And he said, well, you're going to lose at the appeal board, and then your recourse is to take us to district court until you go broke, because we're going to make sure that's what happens. But it's just sad to me, because if you pay for your property in your home, and you pay for it, or a lot of people don't even realize they're paying such high amount in taxes because they think they're paying down a mortgage. And then all of a sudden they say, oh God, I never owned it to begin with. I have to continue to pay rent to live in this place. And then if I don't pay, the government is going to remove me by force. And that's extraordinarily unfortunate for a so-called free country, because that's not freedom at all.
Religious freedom is part of the First Amendment. It's not just, well, actually, shit, I'm stepping on my own intro. I filmed an interview this past week because a buddy of mine in Texas who has a beautiful organic farm, which also has fellowship for a lot of veterans who are getting post-traumatic. I'm stepping on my intro again. Anyway, I shot an interview. I went and edited it. I used my new editing stylings from learning some Adobe Premiere tutorials this week, and I premiered it Sunday morning for the church-going folks to see his story, because he's looking to get the word out. And maybe, just maybe, if I did my job well enough, he can take that video that we published, that you're going to see a sample of, he can hand it to other people like Allison Morrow or Viva Fry or other people who are journalists and lawyers who can help him, bring some light on that situation, because I'm pretty sure it's going on in all the county tax assessor offices across the. When you get, if we don't get to it in the clip, it's in the interview. But there's a part in there where he talks about this corruption in a county office, right? So the state and the feds have said okay to his operation, but the county government's not. They're like, at best you're maybe 50%. We'll give you 50%. They can decide on how much of your religion actually applies to their reality. It's kind of sad, but true. So I would imagine that type of power and corruption goes on. But in that case, like, their office had this big scandal, sex scandal, all this sort of stuff within 6 months of like this all going on. So it shows the character of the people in that office that were going on. So anyway, he's got more sordid, juicy details in the interview. But did I give it to Colby? Let's see. Yes, I did. I gave it to Colby. So what we're going to do is, it's a 40-minute interview. We don't have time to play the whole thing. Let's get you started with first 10 or 15 minutes. I'll prompt Colby on when to cut it. And this is an example not only of how to do an interview, but how to take a complex legal situation, make some questions. I might have took his summary and put it in ChatGPT and said, give me some 60-minute style questions. It might have done a good job. And then how do you get the active literacy into like distribution out to other people? So it's an exercise in that, while simultaneously letting you know about First Amendment rights, property rights, all these sort of things that these people think they have the right to control. You have property, you own it, but not unless you pay rent on that ownership, bro. I don't know. It wasn't in the Godfather movie, maybe, but Godfather 3, they were getting into the international syndicate layer of it. Maybe they need to make a Godfather 4. Pacino's still alive, right? That'd be a good movie. Coppola, is he still kicking around? Might suck at this point. They're all woke. They put De Niro in it and just kill it for sure. All right. So let's go to religious freedom denied in Texas. The court told them, well, he's going to tell you in the intro. I see. It's so obvious. If you edit it properly, it's all done for you right here. America. Land of the free, home of the brave. But imagine for a moment an America without a First Amendment. I'm speaking today not only of the freedom of speech and of the press, but of religion. Religious freedom is at the foundation of America's founding itself, going all the way back to the Pilgrims at Plymouth Rock. How long would it take to erode religious freedom in 21st century America? What would the early stages of it look like? How would those losses of freedom and religious practice adversely affect our families as well as future generations of Americans? Today's guest is Kevin Schmidt, a resident of Texas who converted his organic farm and wedding facility into a weekly oasis for fellowship and worship. Kevin's unorthodox regimen of spirituality, philosophy, and religious history are intersected by the rugged and spacious outdoors of his organic farm. Many in his congregation are veterans seeking to outgrow PTSD by engaging in post-traumatic growth in a healthy and grounded way. The federal and state government have honored Kevin's tax exempt status, but his county government has seen fit and decided to infringe upon his inalienable rights as a human being. This is very un-American. Kevin's here to raise awareness of your rights, as well as a call to action against the restrictions in religious freedom. What's happening in Texas is likely also happening in your part of America. All right, Kevin, when did you start your farm and how did it evolve into a religious entity?
We started construction out here in the bare piney woods of East Texas about 12 or so years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. And we operated as a family organic farm for a whole number of years. And about 6 years ago, is maybe a little bit more than that now, we began, just a few of us every Sunday, getting together, and that evolved into a pretty substantial spiritual practice with a lot of wonderful people coming out all the time from all over the world, actually.
Well, I've seen in the past your expansive greenhouses, and the way you had set up your property was one of the most professional operations I had ever seen. How did that organic farm operation, how did it evolve into the religious entity? Was it people coming by every week and saying, hey, we like this thing we do on Sundays, in the midst of all this other stuff? But I'm just trying to figure out how you shifted gears, because there's a lot of people out there looking for options, and also they're looking for sometimes tax breaks and how they structure and tax plan around properties and things like this. So how did that evolution happen for you? Was it an outside causal factor? Was it an internal creative factor?
Well, my mother and I were partners in the farm, and we were going to just build a few cabins for us to come out here occasionally. We really wanted a place that we could make to be self-sufficient for our family and learn how to grow good, clean food. And in that process, we ended up traveling the world trying to figure out how to do it right, because I didn't know how to grow anything. And we discovered aquaponics. We went on this journey of learning, and we built a really substantial greenhouse, our first one, and it was just so much fun. And I really began to learn just the whole blueprint, the divine blueprint of life, and that our food, doesn't come from Walmart, and that it just became such every moment out here was a spiritual event. And I personally, went through a very dark period, had some personal tragedies, and for a number of years, I was really in a state of depression, and I stopped all farming. I just quit. I didn't feel like seeing anybody. I didn't feel like growing anything. I didn't want to hear anything positive. And I was fortunate enough to have a couple of friends that started coming over on Sundays, and they kind of nicknamed it Documentary Sundays, because we would sit around and watch different topics and discuss philosophy and those sorts of things. And it didn't take long for more and more people to find that an interesting and fun thing to do. And it didn't take long either for us to start delving into our inner selves. We are the reasons for most of our own problems. And being in nature here, we really sat outside and grounded a lot and began meditating in the fields, and it started to become very spiritual. And then as more and more people started to get involved with that, I felt more obligated to start exploring all of the tools available to us individually to start just becoming better people and connecting to each other and to the infinite. And so I started to feel this pleasurable obligation to have presentations, to start doing interviews. And as that started growing, it completely began to interfere with our previous work here. I had already stopped farming, but we would occasionally have weddings still at that time. And then I stopped that too, because it was a problem with our Sundays. And Sundays became a very important part of my life, because it forced me to think about issues within myself and larger than myself that I probably would not have done on my own on a consistent basis every week, all week long. And I formalized it. And I said, well, I'm going to open this up to the public. We have some cabins. People come from all over to stay here for free. It's turned into this beautiful, wonderful place.
Well, I've also, over the years seen your YouTube channel with you and your brother and special guests reading into Bible verses. And I think it's both educational and entertaining because some of the things in there don't fit very well with modern day world. And it's kind of ironic. And there's discussion of definitions and juxtapositions and contradistinctions and all these other high-minded, highfalutin type things that go on in a nice library setting with some people who are investing their time to better know themselves, better know where they came from, where they're going, these sort of things. I think these are all healthy activities and they should be conducted regularly.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the things that the infinite has given us is the ability to critically think and to ask ourselves questions and to dive into a myriad of other topics so that we can become better people.
Now, when did you apply for the religious exemption under Texas law?
It was approximately about 4 years ago, something like that, plus or minus a little bit.
And from my understanding,
well, we were going for a couple of years without me doing that until we got a little bit larger. And I thought, okay, I probably need to do that.
Right. Things keep going on consistently. You're like, I might have to file paperwork now because it's becoming a thing. That's a good sign. That's a sign of growth. That's a very American thing. So you went to the federal government, to my understanding, and the state government, and they said, have at it. You have religious freedom. Good luck. So where's the snag?
Well, the snag was with Harrison County, and we're in Texas, and Harrison County, Texas said at first, me and my attorney went to them and let me back up just a hair. From that time we first went to them until now, there have been 3 chief appraisers, which is the head of the tax office, the property tax office.
Yeah, it's always an interesting position. Did we elect the tax assessor? Is that something I
no.
All right.
No, we don't.
They have an awful lot of say in our lives as far as freedom goes. That's why I'm saying maybe we should all become more interested in how that works.
Yeah. Well, we went and we sat with him and let him know what we were doing. And he said he could not deny us. In fact, he was extraordinarily condescending. And he began to tell us about his church experience and his every Sunday and started to talk about his religious beliefs and what his preacher says. And he said, well, I cannot deny you even if you were out there worshiping snakes, because it was obvious he didn't fully understand what we were doing, because it's basically a Unitarian type religious facility. We think that there's no exact one path to get to enlightenment or self-actualization or self-realization and to connect. And he didn't really like any part of that. So he was being condescending whenever he said, you can worship snakes and I still cannot deny you. Because he already knew what we were doing. And, the word had already been out and spread around this small area. I don't know if he thought we were a bunch of hippies sitting around under a tree or, I have no idea what he thought. All he had to do was watch some of our videos and he'd probably get a quick gist, and that probably aggravated him.
All right. So there's another 2/3 of that interview, and it does have some information at the end about this one time when some people tried to kidnap John Taylor Gatto. And if you make it to the end of that video on my YouTube page about religious freedom, you'll get to hear that story. And then you'd have a question. Who's the they? Who tried to kidnap John Taylor Gatto? I'll give you the answer, but you have to hear the story to understand the answer. It's a 4-letter answer. It's an acronym, and the letters are JASA. That's all I can say about that right now. All right, so YouTube page, Religious Freedom Denied in Texas, Kevin Schmidt video. If that resonates with you, please share it, because he's looking for support and he's looking to encourage other people who are in likewise situations not to capitulate to the war of attrition. And not everyone is well healed. Kevin is a heck of an entrepreneur, and he's a real estate investor, and he owns a lot of places that people rent from him and things like that. It's a good example, but it's still something I think a lot of people, unless they get in touch with stories like that about people like him successfully stepping up, and they don't have to win, but you at least have to step up to the fight, right? That would be inspiring to them if they only knew. So with all that being said, I noticed the Adobe AI editor steps on some of the audio when it's cutting the filler words and stuff out. So I know how to work with that, and I will pay more attention to that in the future. But it didn't hit me till like the 3rd time I watched it. So I was like, oh, that's what you used to get when you edit a movie 3 times. Like, when you had to go through it a bunch of times, you'd find stuff like that. And now with the compression technology, you gotta humanize it still some. So I will work on my video editing. But Scott, did you have observations?
I mean,
Thoughts on
yeah,
that?
I think what we've learned over the last few years with, I never really paid any consideration to the need for religious exemptions, but this last year, that was like neck deep in that whole world, obviously, with the whole shots and the mandates and having to participate in such things myself. And then also just learning the laws around it. And it's like once you invoke your First Amendment protection of your right to freedom of religious practice, like it seems like they back down real quick from my experience. So the fact that they are pushing back and denying on that basis is really quite shocking. I mean, of course he's going to win ultimately, on this, but in my capacities with Unjected, I would write, we'd have people reaching out to us all the time asking for religious exemptions. And the law is so clear that it doesn't have to be like a long-standing belief. It doesn't even have to be an affiliated religion at all. And that's so like when he even said, I don't care if you worship snakes. I mean, that's in alignment with the laws. Like you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a formal religion at all. I was just going to bring this up real quick. This is the form letter that I wrote to lots and lots of people. And I wrote it, Scott Armstrong, spiritual advisor from just Team Humanity. That was the entity that I conjured, that I wrote on behalf. And I sent these out to dozens of people, and I always would hear back that it got approved instantly, because in the writing, I would invoke, this is First Amendment freedom of speech. And then also, these were generally for people applying for jobs, like, particularly in like hospitals. And I would invoke the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that you're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of religious beliefs. And then I say,
Did you mention the Nuremberg trials? Did I miss
no,
that?
I didn't do Nuremberg.
All right.
But then it says, in light of these legal protections, I strongly urge your organization to recognize so-and-so's sincerely held religious belief and accommodate the request for exemption from all vaccination requirements. And so I build up my case in the beginning, and then I say, look, based on the constitutional protections and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you have no basis to deny this claim, and therefore it is strongly urged that you back down immediately. And they always do. I never heard of any of these not getting immediately approved. So that's kind of interesting to hear that even in this day and age, they're playing these types of games. Like, haven't they learned?
And it goes for speech and freedom of the press too, not just religion.
Yeah.
So this is why when I first met Michael Badnarik, I was like, bro, you got to teach that course that teaches everyone about their rights. He's like, people aren't interested. And he had like a defeatist mentality. As it went like this. Like, this was 2019, and in some time back in 2002. Remember 2002? Someone took his constitutional lectures and put them on Google Video. So therefore, no one would ever want to see anything. He's like, because it's out there. I'm like, no one's watching that. You should put together a course and present this. And it was one of the last big projects he did before he graduated from Planet Earth. And it's very illustrative for adults. And funny tangent story, because I know it's the wee hours of the morning, but tangent's always good. Lisa and I said to him one time, hey, this course you made for adults is banger, but how about a course for high school kids so they could learn their rights earlier? Oh, I'm not going to do that. Nobody ever wants that. Whatever his thing was. A couple months later, Michael calls us, often as he did. I got this new idea. Oh, yeah, what's the new idea? I'm going to teach a Constitution course to kids, to high school kids. I said, oh, what made you change your mind? Because a couple months ago, that was like, he's like, well, Jimmy Vaughn asked me if I would teach his teenage daughters about their rights. He's like, I thought that would be a good opportunity. That's Jimmy Vaughn, who's Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother, right? And Jimmy Vaughn funded Michael's campaign in 2004 as a libertarian candidate for these United States. And that's where I discovered libertarian philosophy, from his presentation for that campaign. That's when I stopped voting for the Skull and Bones brothers of 2008, it was, or 2004, whatever it was back then. Yeah. And then after that, I stopped voting for a long time because I saw what was going on. So anyway, little just, before we break the ice with Kurt and Joe Rogan next, and a little bit of Carol Quigley, and a little bit of Truth Stream, because we got to get that in the time capsule. I thought we were going to be able to enjoy the whole piece, but we're not going to be able to. So we'll at least let you know It exists out there, just like those YouTube videos we showed you tonight from Scott's page, my page, and Paul's page. And we didn't even plan that. That's not even part of the new format, but it's kind of cool. Maybe we should keep doing that. It seemed to work well. I think we should also maybe start rotating in guests. It was nice that you and Teese were at the same desk tonight because it was easier to talk to you because it's not like switching screens or whatever. You guys were just in the same place. It was easy. But I could see like we're upgrading stuff, so let's start rotating in guests other than Kurt. Because we don't want to monopolize the humor.
Yeah, that was kind of.
But we got to keep feeding him books, so he keeps telling people about the good stuff.
Exactly. Well, this was kind of a fun thing this weekend. So Kurt wasn't even on the itinerary to be there. Apparently, Pasta had coordinated with him. He was in town for to do a show at Zany's, and apparently they coordinated a surprise appearance from Kurt for Steve's birthday.
Very
And
classy.
So that was really cool. I didn't even know. Until like it started rumbling around the campfire. Like Pasta's like, yeah, we got Kurt showing up. I'm like, what?
Well, happy belated birthday, Steve.
Yeah. So that was cool. I got to meet Kurt.
Clip
I hadn't
Genie
met
for
him
that
before,
one.
so that was pretty awesome. So
I think it's one of the only happy birthdays in a Clip Genie. You'll be able to find it easy. So that is like those are all splendid things. It's been challenging all night because I had to like rearrange this show card a little bit, but I enjoy the extra interactivity, and I think that some of the deep dives that came from that, expialidocious, they might say. Paul, Carol Quigley, when did you first hear about him?
I would say 2007, 2008, when you were formulating Tragedy and Hope as a concept for an actual entity. And you gave me this giant book, which is right here. And boy, was it extra thick. But talk about a treasure trove. And yeah, I think anybody who gets a copy of that book will quickly see, and all of Quigley's books, really, you know what I mean? Anglo-American Establishment, was it Origin of Civilizations?
The Evolution of Civilizations is his
right.
popular textbook that he taught. And he also wrote another book posthumously called Weapons, Systems, and Political Stability, A History, which is also 1,300 pages. It's as big as Tragedy and Hope or something like that, maybe 700 pages. It's a big book. And there's a correlation between political systems and weapon systems. They might be connected. One might give. What did Mao say? Power grows out of the end of a barrel of a gun. And that was David Rockefeller's best project. Oh, yeah. The guys who funded the Bolsheviks and the communists also funded the Nazis. That's Anthony Sutton arrival. I sent Kurt, because, we're going to show you this clip where Kurt mentioned Tragedy and Hope and Cecil Rhodes and De Beers on the Joe Rogan podcast. So millions of people just got a glimpse of what has been known among researchers for a long time. We've been trying to get people to talk about it. And Kurt, he let it go out there. And so to celebrate, I was like, I texted him, I was like, hey, hearing you reference my work was awesome, but hearing you mention Tragedy and Hope and Cecil Rhodes to Rogan was like priceless. And then I said, do you know Dr. Anthony Sutton's work? Do you have his books? He said, no. So I said, all right, good. So I went to a place to get a book, got a bunch of books, and whenever he gets back to his place, he'll have those books. And I gave him specific directions. I'm like, read this book first, look for this keyword, and it'll start to decrypt the whole puzzle. And that keyword, in case you guys are playing at home, which I hope you are, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, open it up, read chapter 1, the American International Corporation, and those same skull and bones, robber baron people, a decade later, they fund the Nazis after they fund the Bolsheviks. And they're working with the British the whole time. And they might be working with some bankers the whole time. And it all might be intertwined in more interesting history than you've ever seen of all the History Channel episodes. That's just cool. So anyway, there's a lot of potential out there. And
I did a little Tragedy and Hope thing on my YouTube, or my Instagram this last week. I was able to get 2 different copies of first editions.
Yeah.
I ordered a first edition, the orange cover one, like the first printing. And then there's a yellow covered one that also says first printing.
Yeah, but one's the bootleg. So you want to know how to tell which one's which?
So I got the yellow cover first printing right here.
Yeah.
And then this says, I did this autistic. People were commenting autistic much on the thing, and so like, but this is the one that says GSG printing right here, and it says
Okay.
first published on Macmillan on the title page,
Yeah. So what's the year on that one?
but it still says first printing. It says first published in '66. This one doesn't have a year. It says Carroll Quigley, 1966, first printing. But it has this GSG Associates that the orange cover one doesn't have. So we think that that's the original. So in the video, what I did is audited the typesetting on the, because I want to find out like, was this the
I
one
could-
that has the stuff taken out?
No. Wait, so there's a couple different ones. All right. So first
Okay.
off, mine from 2004, GSG Associates. This is the one they sell on Amazon.
Yeah.
Right? I bought it in 2004 because I learned about this and I was like, no way, Stan Monteith. Carroll Quigley, 1966. And then it says first printing, the Macmillan Company, New York. Even though this is 2004 reprint, it says GSG Associates at the bottom with it's got a new ISBN, but on the first, on the cover page, let me just show you. Jeez, I have a book cam. How silly of me at 4 a.m. All right, here. This says as like first published in 1966 by Macmillan, right? Which is New York, London. It's an Anglo-American company. Quigley's so hilarious to like submit this to their own people, right?
Yeah.
And if you go to 1966, first printing, Macmillan Company. So it doesn't say 2004, but it does have the newer stamp of GSG.
Yeah, so that mine has a similar GSG stamp, so that's really interesting. So I was just curious if this was the edited one.
All right, so do I have?
But I compared the typesetting page by page randomly, and it's exactly the same as the original
Well,
print.
first off, when Monteith's going to go bootleg that book back in the day, like apparently it was top quality. And so like any good counterfeit, there are slight, differences between it and the original. So according to the research that I've done, the original Tragedy and Hope book had gold lettering on the spine and the edges of the pages were gold. That was an added expense that whoever made the bootlegs didn't do. And then at some point, knowing that there are bootlegs out there, they probably flooded the market with the censored, more easily attainable version as like a countermeasure. Because when Quigley first, I have Quigley talking about how all this happened in the next clip, but I'm going to summarize it because otherwise the part we play might not be the right part. And it's too long to put in its entirety. When Tragedy and Hope comes out in 1966, Macmillan gets a call and they're like, put a halt on that. No more books, destroy the plates, never print it again. And 2 years later, 1968, Macmillan takes the second half of the book. So they take out the first, 1,000 pages or, 700 pages, 600 pages, and they just give you like the rest of the book. That book is a rare book called The World Since 1939, A History. And it literally is verbatim. It's like word for word. They just cut the book in half and they're like, it's okay for people to know the end of the story as long as they don't understand the beginning of the story. And
Interesting.
I keep that one in my office upstairs because it's more rare and doesn't need to be referenced as often. But Quigley talks about this in an interview with Rudy Maxa in 1976, if I remember. I don't see the date. Quigley dies in 1977. Right after he gives this interview, the interview ends with him telling Rudy Maxa from the New York Times to turn off the tape. Like, you can't talk about Lionel Curtis. Your career, your life might depend on it type stuff. The people that were doing this apparently had some people like maybe Cecil Rhodes' co-conspirator William T. Stead, who agreed with the conspiracy in 1902 when he's working with Rhodes. Rhodes dies. He publishes the last will. But if he disagrees with what happens after Rhodes dies and gets kicked out of the group or tries to leave that internal group, he dies on the Titanic in 1912, along with other people who were opposing like the Federal Reserve. Maybe like an Astor. I think it was John Jacob Astor IV, maybe. So there's a lot of interesting history that ties into it that we're not going to be able to fit in any episode. but discerning which copies of Tragedy and Hope are the real ones. And I just take it down to, does it contain all the information? Does it tell you for the Bank of International Settlements and that it was Helmar Horace Greeley Schacht from Brooklyn, who was Hitler's banker, who worked with Montague Norman of the Bank of England? A similar position to the guy Carney, who just took over Canada. So those money powers funded and industrialized before they could even fund the Nazis. They had to rebuild it after World War I. And that caused a lot of hyperinflation over there, and it caused a Great Depression over here because the investment money from those skull and bones type robber baron bankers were investing in pennies on the dollar. And the Bush and Harriman family, according to John Loftus, they created Auschwitz as an industrial park with railroad tracks to like connect the Soviet Union with Europe, let's say. Not that they intended for it to have the final purpose alleged to the Nazi regime, right? But they built the infrastructure. Without that infrastructure, the Nazis couldn't have conducted an operation like that. So anyway, before the communists could take over all China, they had to build railroads. And that's where American International Corporation comes in, because after these robber barons set up America and Europe in the 1800s, they're like, who else needs railroads? Nobody? You guys got all the railroads needed? They went over to Soviet Union, what became the Soviet Union and what became Communist China. And they set up the infrastructure over there so they could conduct war on almost an equal scale. Much the same as like in the 1980s, the United States is funding Saddam Hussein, giving him chemical weapons and crazy stuff. Then a couple years later, we got to go make sure he doesn't have that stuff anymore. You know? So it's almost like they plant the drugs and then they come and bust the guy. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the 7-5 documentary by Tiller Russell. Sorry, that was.
Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day You could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come